Simon Calvert, Deputy Director for Public Affairs at the Christian Institute, also has reservations about it. Good morning to you, Simon.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Andrew's done a brilliant job of explaining the sort of key parts of the legislation that have given rise to concern. Much of it is about rationalising existing legislation, as he tells us, but this
That's right.
stirring up hatred, is that the aspect of it that you're concerned about?
Yes, that's absolutely right. As Andrew says, the rest of the bill is nothing like as controversial. The Part 2 stirring up offences, though, I mean, that has been colossally badly executed. Now, I want to give credit to the Justice Secretary. He has been prepared to listen. He has been prepared to move. He has been prepared to speak to a wide range of people. And, you know, that's got to be welcomed. But there's still a long way to go before Part 2 is fit to be put into effect. It's right that the government has backed down on the issue of intent, and that was important, but you're still left in a situation where at the end of the day, intent is inferred from circumstances. And so you can well imagine a situation, especially, as Andrew says, in the current kind of climate where, you know, identity politics and that sort of thing are such hot potato issues. You can imagine a situation in a court where they say, well, you must have known that what you were saying was controversial in the current climate. You must have known.
Well, give us an example, albeit hypothetical, Simon, of what you'd be concerned about. Because, you know, there's going to be people listening this morning who are thinking, why should I care about this? So why should anyone listening this morning, in your view, Simon, care about this or be concerned about this?
So obviously I represent a religious constituency, Christians, evangelical Christians. We can come in for some stick. People can take it upon themselves to say, you know, all kinds of things about religious people. If you do any kind of, you know, work in the public square on behalf of the churches, there are particular themes that those who want to attack you will refer to, and they will try and associate you with, you know, child sex abuse scandals in the church and that sort of thing. So they clearly they have a hatred for you. They want to express that dislike, and that's all pretty odious. But what about just at the level where people are saying, you know, well, these religious people, you know, they're enforcing their beliefs on other people. They have these Stone Age beliefs. You know, they believe in sky fairies, you know, all this kind of stuff that you get from the kind of the new atheists. At what point, and I wouldn't do this, but, you know, at what point could a religious person say, well, you're clearly trying to stir up hatred against us on the grounds of our faith? You don't want discussion at that level being a matter for the police. I might despise it, but I would much rather hear somebody spout that nonsense and be able to come back at them and explain why I think it's nonsense, or, you know, maybe even persuade them, you know, with a cordial argument. But
so your concern is that it shuts down debate? Involved.
Yes, I mean, at the early stages of this legislation, you had the police saying that it threatened the legitimacy of the police by forcing them to become arbiters of other people's opinions. Now, admittedly, the shape of the legislation has moved back a bit from them, but like I say, putting intent in, whilst it's welcome, it does not solve the problem because, you know, what is intent? It's easy to say. You must have known in the current climate that people would be offended by what you said, that they would find it abusive, that they would think it was stirring up hatred. And you might say, no, I didn't know that, but it is a matter of evidence in the court. They could still find against you.
Are you concerned at all that, Simon, that people with religious faith might fall foul of this legislation? I mean, the example you gave us that people might take pot shots at you and you've got broad shoulders and you're happy to have the discussion. But, I mean, are there those within the faith community that think that they might fall foul of this?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, Andrew mentioned the issue, I think, of same-sex marriage. Now, that's a controversial issue, certainly for many in the faith community who believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. You would be surprised at how often the mildest, gentlest expression of that belief is responded to with rage and people saying, you hate gay people. you are stirring up hatred against gay people by holding that belief, by expressing that belief. Now, clearly we're not.
Well, let's take that. Let's take that example, because that's a real-world example, for people to sort of grab onto. So, Andrew, would affirm and repeated expression of now I've got to choose my words, a non-approval of same-sex marriage constitute an offence potentially within this new legislation?
No, I don't think so. I mean,
you don't think so? Do you know so?
Here's the test. So work your way through it. Is that a threatening or abusive form of behaviour? In terms of abusive, the court would have to take a kind of objective approach to that. So it's important to be really clear that it's not the complainer's reaction which is legally significant. The word offensiveness is no part of this legislation. So we need to be really clear that we need to establish threatening or abusive behaviour with an intention to stir up hatred against a group of persons based on their characteristics. I personally don't consider that would be applicable. And it's worth saying as well, there's specific provisions in the legislation which gives free speech particular protections around discussions of sexual orientation and religion. Some people argue they don't go far enough, but nevertheless they are written into the legislation that calling on people to cease, for example, being homosexual shouldn't in and of itself be treated as threatening or abusive. So I don't think it is probable, likely or convincing that kind of scenario would be covered.
Simon, are you overreacting?
No, well, I mean, look, I think Andrew's quite fair, but I think he points out that there's this free speech clause, but the people say it doesn't go far enough. One of the things that is in the equivalent free speech clause in England, but is not in the free speech clause in Scotland, is reference to the issue of marriage. So that's specifically not included. And then you have, what does the word abusive mean? As I say, people routinely use that word to describe the mildest expression of certain Christian beliefs. And it's not right to say that will have no influence on the police and on prosecutors and on the courts. It will have an influence, and that will be important as a matter of evidence. What is hatred? I mean, that's another very important question. I think that Andrew, the reason I say Andrew is fair is because he said, in my opinion, and this is it will come down to the views of police, procurators fiscal, and then judges in the courts. And let's remember that judges and police have been amongst the leading voices criticising this legislation precisely for this kind of vagueness.